Well, hello. Hi, Madeline. Can you see me?
There we go. Hi,
Hi.
Sarah.
Hey, how are you?
There we go. I can see myself.
I can see you. Oh, there we are.
There we are. Okay, great. We already have people coming in here. Well, getting settled.
Okay. That's awesome. Wow.
I'm just gonna test out something's happening with my earbuds here. I'm just gonna test to make sure I can hear.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
There we go. Okay. Let's you. Are
Can you hear me
can you
okay?
say something, Sarah?
Yeah. How are you? Can you hear me okay? I
Go.
don't think you're
Oh,
kind of coming and going.
very faint.
Yeah.
But no, it's not you. It's not you. It's me.
Okay. Like
Yeah.
I was on it earlier. It seemed okay earlier in the day.
No, that's okay. I just noticed in a meeting earlier that it was
Oh, hi, Peter. You can hear us. Hello.
oh good. You can
You-
hear.
you-
I can hear you
Thank
finally.
you. We're getting organized, hey?
That's great. Now, did you want to put up a PowerPoint?
Yes, I'll share with you. Are you ready for me to screen share?
Yeah, I'm gonna stop share. There we go. And you should be able to share.
Yeah. It's gonna do just a
Right. Super.
there. How's that?
Yeah, that's great.
Perfect.
There we go. I can keep my eyes on the chat here. And yeah, and Mark will join us and maybe he might be here. Let's see.
Perfect. And I think we've got, it looks like there's lots of participants. You guys can hear Madeline and I already, I think, right?
Yeah, they can. Yeah,
Awesome. Okay.
yeah. And this is why,
I'll be on my best behavior.
what's that?
I said I'll be on my best behavior for a few minutes.
Yeah. And yeah, this is why I had to change it from a meeting to webinar style. So meeting, everybody goes in. Well, you've probably done this many times in the waiting room, and then we let them in at the beginning. But a webinar, we have everyone here coming in, and we can't see them face to face, but we can interact in the chat. And that's simply because there were 129 people registered. Uh, so just in case everyone shows up.
Amazing, amazing. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So welcome everybody as you're coming in. Great. Yeah. Hi, Steve. Made it on time, Francois. Excellent. Great. Make yourself comfortable, and we'll get going in about 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Everybody survived the eclipse.
My teenager was rushing out the door this morning, and I was kind of teasing her yesterday to make sure she was protecting all of her energy spheres for the day. And so I sent her out with her sunglasses and her a stern warning to behave yourself. It was cloudy. She came home and she promptly reminded me that it was quite overcast and I didn't worry.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. It was cloudy. I know. It's kind of funny when you tell kids like, whatever you do, don't look up at the sky at 11 o'clock. You can guarantee at 11 o'clock they're going to look up at the
The
sky.
adults are all out. Yeah, it's true.
All right, I'm actually just going to try these earbuds
Yeah, and
because we've got a few minutes.
I'm recovering from this cold thing that's been going around. So
Oh, geez.
pardon me, I may put myself on mute and have a little bit of a cough every once in
Yeah,
a while.
yeah.
I
No, go
apologize.
for it. Okay.
Oh gosh, we got people from Nova Scotia. Really? I love that.
Oh, Steve, hi. Yeah.
Oh, cool, cool.
Yeah. And I know I think there's a couple people joining us from the Maritimes who were here at the clinic and then made a move, but still participate in the online program.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. Hi, Sharon from West Kelowna, and from Cynthia's here from Nelson. Lynn's here from Salmon Arm.
Oh, wow, this is so much fun. I love it. So cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Mark,
Mark's
Dr.
here.
Lawrence would like to be let in.
We always keep him waiting for a few minutes. I guess I'll let him in. Yeah. There we go. Oh yeah, Marjorie's here from Tulameen.
Hey there.
Nathan's here from Nick Cuss. Hello, hello. We decided to let you in tonight.
Yeah, I heard that comment. Yeah, right. Sarah, good to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me.
Oh no, absolutely. It's our, our privilege to have you here. Thanks very much for joining. It's wonderful. So yeah. Are you you're based in Kelowna?
I am, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
wow, okay.
I'll
Right.
tell you a little of my story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can actually, we're at 6 o'clock, so we can actually get started. I just really want to welcome everybody here tonight. We have a super popular topic tonight. And before I go into who we've got for our very special guest tonight, I'll turn it to Mark just to get us going from the clinic.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, a very, very special and warm welcome to Sarah Robbins, who's a gastroenterology specialist, who's joining us this evening and is going to be doing a series on basically nutrition and lifestyle medicine about the gut and how it relates to chronic pain. So I'm super excited. Sarah, thank you very much for joining us. It's our privilege to have you here, and I really am interested in what you have to say. I think it'll be very, very applicable to many of our patients. So without wasting any time, I'm going to turn it over to you and Madeline.
Amazing. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'll just do a little introduction, and yes, just to let people know, as you probably know, we have a series of 4 talks on gut health this month, and there's a lot of people attending. So as we move through tonight, if your questions, if you have outstanding questions, they just might be answered next week or the week after. If it's something that we don't get to tonight, feel free to just email me. Let me know this is important to you, and we'll make sure that we get to it. So yeah, we have a big group because we have a big group tonight, and this is such an interesting and I think largely overlooked topic. I think until recently, and so yeah, Dr. Sarah Robbins is with us. She's a gastroenterologist and nutrition specialist. and the founder of Well Sunday Health Corporation. And you probably do want to check out Well Sunday, the website, and I've posted it in the chat. It's an educational platform that offers cutting edge science-based health and nutrition information. Really important. All designed to improve gut health. So with over 20 years of evidence-based expertise, Dr. Robbins believes in, I know tonight you're going to leave with some very practical tips to help you achieve better health. And for us here, we're talking about the gut-brain axis and how that interacts with chronic pain. And so I will pass it over to Sarah to get us going.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's nice. Wow, what a it's kind of a pleasure to be here. It's pretty neat. I by way of introduction, do live in Kelowna, but I have transitioned out of a really, I guess, like very traditional hospital-based and clinic-based gastroenterology practice into health promotion and nutrition information, and just kind of really circling back to finding platforms like this to be able to offer education and discussion and information in just a really different way than what we traditionally do. So yeah, that website and the social media, Instagram and things, they're always evolving. It's like this whole new adventure for me. So it's kind of fun. And it's really neat to connect with the pain clinic. I must say I'm not a pain specialist. I'm a gastroenterologist and a nutritionist, and so I don't come to this talk from really an expertise from pain management, but really more from gut health. Having said that, so many of my my GI patients have chronic pain, and there's just such an overlap, I think, between physiology and then so many of our interventions and medications and things like that pain affects gut and gut affects pain, and that's really what we're here to talk about tonight. So I thought for tonight's session, I'll focus really on talking about the gut-brain axis and the gut microbiome, and maybe a little bit of the physiology. And that maybe is not quite so much take home and really practical stuff, which I thought we'd get more into over the next couple of sessions, so that we kind of build that physiology and that understanding, and we have a mutual understanding of what we're talking about. So that's how I thought I'd structure it tonight.
Right.
I love questions, and I do have the chat up. I know, Madeline, you're going to kind of moderate for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I like questions as we go, and that's kind of, it's just fun and interactive. And of course, with the webinar format, I can't see you guys. So if you have a question, then just let me know, because I don't have any other way really of getting your feedback. So please.
Okay,
please
if I see a question come up that pertains to what you're talking about, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
With it.
So let's talk about the gut-brain axis. And so, the gut-brain axis is, of course, I think it's the most fascinating thing in the world, but it really represents this complex bidirectional communication network between your brain and your gut. And I think what's so incredibly important about that is understanding that this truly is bidirectional. It's not a one-way street. Your brain talks to your gut, and your gut talks to your brain. And so often when I think about conditions like irritable bowel, for example, people will say to me, I just want this to be over. I'm like, it's not over. Your brain and your gut are never going to stop having a conversation. And so really, if they've stopped having a conversation, we've got bigger problems. So really what we want to do is figure out ways to modulate and guide that conversation in a way that that is really very healthy for us. And if we think about this, the gut-brain axis is really not a new a new concept. You know, Hippocrates has been attributed as saying all disease begins in the gut. And and so this really goes back a long ways. More recently, we've really started to have this change in our understanding, so that over the years, we've started to see some interest in how psychological factors affect the gut. And so, you know, we used to think so much about how stress, for example, caused ulcers. And we know now that there's many, many other things and more important things that cause ulcers. But for a long time, we felt stress caused ulcers. And so we started to have this interest around the gut-brain axis actually for some time now, even though we haven't called it by that name. And then, of course, over time, we've had a better understanding of neurotransmitters. And we've come to understand that so much of the neurotransmitters that we produce and metabolize are actually made in the gut. And now the knowledge and understanding of the gut microbiome has really started to fuel this topic and this discussion even further. So the gut-brain connection is complicated, and I think we're really just beginning to scratch the surface of our understanding of what that means. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the physiology today. But really, what we're talking about are components of the nervous system, both the central nervous system and the enteric nervous system, or the nervous system of the gut, a number of hormones, a number of neurotransmitters, the immune system, which is very largely housed in your gut, and then, of course, the gut microbiome. And so this network is sort of like this very iterative discussion, I think, where your gut sends signals to your brain, and that helps us to sense fullness. It senses discomfort. You know, we know what it's like to have a tummy ache and various pains. And on a hormonal level, it actually helps us to sense specific nutrients. We sense whether or not we've had protein or fat in our diet, for example, all of which interact to change our mood and regulate our overall health. And our brain responds accordingly. So this helps us to understand and regulate appetite, our stress response, and cognitive function. So we really have this dynamic interplay between brain and gut. And there's a number of physiologic mechanisms that are involved in this. So the first one is the nervous system, which really facilitates this direct communication between your nerve, between the gut and the brain. And that primarily relates to the central nervous system, the enteric nervous system, which we'll talk about, and then our autonomic nervous system, which really regulates that sympathetic versus parasympathetic, the fight or flight. And I think we've all heard the term rest and digest. And so the importance of that parasympathetic in regulating gut health is actually critical. We then have hormones like hunger hormones, such as ghrelin or leptin, which is our satiety hormone, and various stress hormones that are also really integral to the gut-brain axis. So cortisol, which many of us have heard about as an important stress hormone, actually has a huge impact on the function of the gut, a direct impact. And so this regulates appetites and our stress responses. And finally, neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and GABA are all crucial for the gut-brain connection. About 70% and probably more of our whole body's serotonin is actually produced in the gut. And we've always thought about that as being so central in origin, but it actually comes from your gut.
I'm just thinking, Sarah, that everything that you're talking about are things that we talk about in relation to pain and the central nervous system. So, I mean, the fact that we haven't really included the gut till now is actually astounding.
It's so important for how we metabolize, like not only produce serotonin, but actually how we metabolize it. And the gut microbiome is involved in that metabolism. So the alterations in our gut microbiome actually alter our breakdown of serotonin, for example. And so that, that really influences our serotonin levels is our gut health, and not just our own gut health, but the health of our gut microbiome. So these things all really interplay into that. So the enteric nervous system is what people often call the second brain. And it consists of these neurons that are actually embedded directly in the gut wall. There's two layers of that. And they're kind of an independent system, like it's its own system that operates in conjunction with our brain and the central nervous system, but it's actually kind of like its own separate little unit inside the gut. And these really control gut motility and secretion and blood flow. And that interacts, of course, with our central nervous system, our brain, which is, the brain and the spinal cord that receives our sensory information and sends out motor information. And then the autonomic nervous system, which is that sympathetic fight or flight response, and the parasympathetic rest and digest response. So all three of those components of the nervous system are really important to how the gut and the brain interact with each other. And I mentioned there's a number of neurotransmitters that are really key in this interaction as well, and a number of hormones that we can think about. And I think that in a lot of ways, the specifics of those things are probably less important than just that global understanding of how complex that system really is, and how much we have to learn really about all of that. So the gut-brain axis, some people also refer to it as the microbiome gut-brain axis, because wrapped within that is the gut microbiome, and it really interacts with all levels of the gut. But we know that there are a number of inputs between various components of the gut: the immune cells, the lining of the gut epithelial cells, the enteric nervous system, the smooth muscles of the cells, the enterochromaffin cells that all make neurotransmitters, and then the interstitial cells, which really are what form that tight junction. So how our cells are connected together inside the lining of our gut. And we've all heard this concept of having a leaky gut. And part of that, actually maintaining the integrity of those junctions, relates to the health of the gut-brain axis. So that prevention of leaky gut and those concepts, which we'll explore a little bit more, are actually also linked to both your brain function and to the health of the gut microbiome. So when we think about it, really the gut-brain axis is this incredibly important bidirectional network that's influenced by things that are external to us, and it's influenced by things that are internal to us. And of course, we have our underlying genetic makeup. And the gut microbiome is probably one of, I could reposition it maybe and put it right in the middle of the slide here, because it really almost acts as the interpreter in the conversation between the brain and the gut. But I think when we think about health and disease, and we think about potential for intervention on both levels, because these two are constantly having this interaction and dialogue with each other, it means that there's opportunity for intervention at both the level of the brain and the level of the gut, as well as the level of the gut microbiome in controlling that whole discussion. And it also means that there are things within us biologically and physiologically that we control, and that there are things external to us that we also can control, that can influence that entire dialogue and discussion between the brain and the gut. So there's a lot of opportunity there in my mind to explore, so many things that that we actually have a lot of control over. It feels so often like the things related to our health are difficult to control. But when we look at this, there are a number of things that we are able to control and of particular importance. And really the biggest lever that we have control over that we can modulate in this entire axis is our diet and our lifestyle that influences all of this. And of course, how we think about and manage our stress. So the gut-brain axis and the microbiome within that really change, or the gut microbiome really, I guess, is this crucial role in the gut-brain axis and modulates that link between the two. So we know that the microbiome alters the production and expression of a number of important neurotransmitters. It also plays a role in intestinal barrier function. So, really keeping that our gut is one of the primary ways that we sample the external world. We think about how our immune system is exposed to things, right? We can be exposed through what we breathe, through our skin, and really through our gut. That's how we sample so much of the world from an immunologic standpoint. So keeping that barrier function healthy and protecting those tight junctions is actually very important, because that's part of what allows us to keep our immune system healthy. And this is incredibly important in metabolism of a number of nutrients, and in particular, production of short-chain fatty acids. Our gut is key in that, which is one of the things that maintains mucosal health. So it's hard to sort of, really like summarize what's the gut-brain interaction, because it's so large, and I think that we're just, as I say, very barely beginning to skim the surface of all of these different components. So it leads me to explore a little bit around what is the gut microbiome, because we hear about that so often, and it's so important and so essential in this conversation between our brain and our gut. And yet, I don't know if we always define it all that well. So the gut microbiome includes bacteria. It includes actually fungi and viruses. So, it's not just bacteria, which is what we normally think about, but it's a number of other microorganisms. And we have a number of microbiomes. We have our gut microbiome being the one that is of so much interest now. But we have a skin microbiome. We have a urobiome, which is the biome of the urinary system and the urinary tract. We have the microbiome that is distinct in our mouth. And these entities, this massive number of microbes and bacteria in our gut is probably at least equal to the number of human cells that we have. But even more interesting is the interaction that has with our human cells. And then how all these different microbiomes actually interact with each other. So your skin microbiome, for example, interacts with your gut microbiome. And these systems talk to each other. And that's one of the ways that, skin and digestive health is linked, is actually through the discussion between those two different microbiomes. So these are highly metabolically active entities. And I think, for a long time, we thought of them as sort of like being present, but not actually doing anything, or interacting, within themselves. But really, we can think of these microbiomes as being more like ecosystems that reside among us and are really very metabolically active. Our microbiome forms actually at a very young age. So obviously, when we're in utero, when we're in mom's tummy, we're in a sterile environment, and we're exposed to metabolites from her microbiome, but we don't have one of our own. So when we're born at birth, our microbiome begins to form and develop. So the microbiome that we have today actually started when we were born. And that is influenced by our genetics. It's influenced by how we were delivered. So whether or not it was a vaginal delivery or a cesarean section, whether we were breastfed or bottle fed. And then, of course, all of these environmental exposures that we have, many of them very early on in life that start to form the microbiome. So our microbiome that we have now it began a long, long time ago for all of us. And we know that this microbiome is shaped by so many different factors over the course of our lifetime. So, it starts and it really kind of at a very young age becomes foundational for us. And then slowly over time, it's influenced by various things in our environment, whether we're exposed to antibiotics, particularly at a young age, whether or not we have other gut infections, and then, of course, other lifestyle exposures, like environmental exposures, whether or not we grow up in rural areas versus urban areas, seasonal changes, all of these kinds of things that influence how our microbiome forms in our early years. What's interesting is that our psychological environment also influences the formation of our gut microbiome. So, exposure to stress, even at a young age, actually influences how our microbiome forms. So, we can take little lab rats, and there's actually pediatric studies too. And when you take young creatures that are exposed to stress, they actually develop a different microbiome than those who are not exposed to stress. So even at a very young age, stress exposure actually helps to shape and influence how our microbiome forms, and that may down the road actually influence a number of additional health outcomes, including our mental health. And so they're actually really tightly regulated beginning very early in life. What's interesting is that for the most part, healthy adults have a relatively stable microbiome. So that microbiome that we develop when we're young and that starts to grow and shift and change with us early on actually stays with us. You can think of it kind of like a fingerprint. And we all develop our own fingerprint. And it shifts a little bit over time, but for the most part, it's relatively stable. And so when we do things to it, like take a course of antibiotics, for example, we do change our microbiome. But what's interesting is that it often tends to change back. It kind of drifts back. You return to your fingerprint, which is why when it comes to diet and nutrition and behavioral change and interventions that we make to have a healthy microbiome, you can't do something for just a week or two or a couple of days and expect long-lasting changes in your microbiome, because your microbiome will drift back to that fingerprint that you developed very early on in the course of your life. So when we do things that are good for our microbiome, we actually need to sustain them in order to sustain that healthy, positive change over the long term.
So Sarah, we've had a couple of questions. I don't know if we want to save them till the end.
Let's go for it.
Okay.
Let's go for it.
There's one that you, I think that you've answered partially. How, and this is probably a question a lot of people have too. But how do antibiotics affect your microbiome when developing? I guess when like early antibiotics. I was very happy to hear that you can shift back after a course of antibiotics, but
yeah. We do tend to, everyone's had a course of antibiotics, and one of two things happen. It's really interesting. You feel rotten for like a couple of weeks and you get bad diarrhea and everything is really crummy. And then it kind of goes away. And that really reflects that like your microbiome actually went back to how it was. And some people who maybe have some gut dysbiosis to begin with actually feel fantastic when they get a course of antibiotics, and they'd love to have them over again. But interestingly, that often doesn't last, and their symptoms, their gut dysbiosis kind of returns slowly over time. So when we're exposed to antibiotic at a young age, it seems that the microbiome kind of forms like a little bit differently. It has predominant species that are different when we're exposed to antibiotics at a young age than compared to people who don't have early antibiotic exposure. And really, when we think about the microbiome, a healthy microbiome means that it has a lot of abundance and a lot of diversity. So there's a lot of critters in there, and there's a lot of different kinds of critters. That's a healthy gut microbiome. But what we don't know is exactly which microbiome is healthy. So, for example, you could take 10 fantastically well people, and they would all have different microbiomes. And one of them is not necessarily better than another. So there's not a gold standard healthy microbiome. We know that an unhealthy microbiome is less robust, it's less diverse, it's less abundant, it's more fragile. But there's probably a whole host of unhealthy microbiomes, like that, some that maybe relate to different types of disease states. And then there's a whole host of what we would consider healthy microbiomes, but there's not actually a gold standard in terms of what that is. So there's a lot of variability in that.
That is so interesting that it would alter and then alter back compared to where you were to begin with. Yeah, and
Better
so
or
the
worse.
question would probiotics alter the fingerprint? I think that's often what we go to now with antibiotics.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really interesting question. And long term, the answer is probably not.
Oh,
If you take a course of probiotics, for example, for a couple of weeks, you may get benefit in that time that you're taking them, but you're not changing your fingerprint of your gut microbiome long term. So if you take a probiotic and you're experiencing benefit from it, most of the time, most people actually need to stay on that over the longer term, so that we really are kind of shifting that ecosystem down into a different direction, that remains very durable, which takes months to years. So a course of antibiotics or probiotics for a couple of weeks may help you with your symptoms temporarily, which is fine. You don't necessarily need to be on them long term. But if you're really trying to get this drive a shift and change in microbiome, probiotics will only be present sort of as long as you're taking them, and then they fall back.
okay.
We need to put
That's very
other
helpful.
lifestyle measures in place to go with them. So if you eat cheesies and take a bottle of microbiome, a bottle of probiotics, you're taking these bacteria, but you're not giving them any nutrients. And so we really need diet, which is again our biggest lever, to go hand in hand with things like probiotics, or whether they're a pill or whether it's in your yogurt, it doesn't matter. They need something to sustain them, right? So those behavior things need to go hand in hand. They both need to be long term in order to create sustainable, enduring change in the health of your gut microbiome.
Right, that makes a lot of sense, and I know that's what we're going to be diving into over the course of these 4 weeks. And I think the other question you'll probably be diving more into, more about, the question is, what would some symptoms be if your gut and brain they're not communicating or not communicating well?
Yeah, like so many.
Yeah.
That it's interesting. I'm kind of just scrolling through my slides here to maybe to speak to that a little bit better. But I guess it leads me to talk a little bit about pain perception
Okay, sure.
and the
Yeah.
role of gut health, because actually, well, maybe I'll put it, you know, let me go back to the gut microbiome for a second, because your gut microbiome has so many implications around your digestive health. You know, about 70% to 90% of your immune system is actually housed in the mucosal tissue along the length of your gut. And then so much of this is linked to metabolic regulation. So obesity, metabolic disorders, mental health, anxiety, depression, chronic disease states, and chronic pain, you know, but even if we think about neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's disease, for example, all of those have been linked to the health of the gut microbiome. So when you ask me what are some of the symptoms, well, interestingly, there are a huge number of both acute symptoms that we may experience with sudden changes in our gut microbiome, like just diarrhea, for example. But there's a lot of chronic disease and wellness that is linked to the health and integrity of our gut microbiomes. And so it's kind of a hard question to answer, what are some of the symptoms, because there's just so many things that are actually related to gut microbiome health. And really, I would consider it actually now, given our current understanding, integral to our health. I think maintaining the health of your gut microbiome, you know, we've always thought about like looking after your skin or your hair, or maybe your liver health or something like that. But I think you could easily add to that list, keeping the health of your gut microbiome as something of top priority, particularly when you think about how diverse its impact can be in all of these various conditions.
Yeah, it looks like it. It looks like it's pretty important
There's a lot of things.
for almost everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, pain, like, I feel like I'm talking to the pain experts, but gut health is really increasingly linked to our understanding of pain. And in central sensitization, for example, where this nervous system has this persistent state of higher reactivity and sensation of pain, the gut-brain axis is actually felt to be, one of the very important factors in directing that physiology and dialogue that occurs. And interestingly, the integrity of that gut-brain barrier, that the health of the lining of your gut, is incredibly important in preventing systemic inflammation. And it's felt that a lot of that central sensitization and so much of the illness that we experience is actually related to chronic inflammation, whether it's on a microscopic level or on a macro level. Much of that is related back to the integrity of the barrier of the gut, which is actually what allows us to exclude from our bodies so much the external environment that we're ingesting. So inflammation really is modulated by the gut microbiome, and all of these cytokines, like these proteins that are made within the immune system, that I always kind of consider sort of like fuel to the fire of our immune system. And this central sensitization is really felt to in part be related to chronic inflammation, which in some ways comes back to the health of your gut. These neurotransmitters we talked about a little bit, and we know that they're incredibly important in that entire pathway. And your vagus nerve is incredibly important to how we sense pain, but it's also one of the primary nerves that's key to regulation of the gut. So that vagal nerve system is incredibly important in linking gut brain. So a lot of this is felt to occur through both neurologic effects as well as through chronic inflammatory mediators. So dysbiosis really refers to the imbalance between healthy bacteria and unhealthy bacteria that we have in our gut. So gut dysbiosis kind of refers to that balance. And when we have an imbalance or gut dysbiosis, it's felt to lead to a breakdown in the barrier function of the gut, which is what allows bacterial translocation or particles of bacteria or metabolites from bacteria to reach into central circulation to circulate through us. And that may contribute to systemic inflammation, which then amplifies pain through glial cell activation in the central nervous system. So this heightens our sense of pain. So there are like a number of different mechanisms that this can occur through, but really those three components are really very, very key, I think, to how the gut microbiome influences pain, inflammation, barrier integrity, and then the health of the gut microbiome through those three mechanisms. And so, really, there's a lot that we can do around the health of our gut microbiome, which I want to talk about next week. Like, how do you have a healthy, robust microbiome? Because that's really what regulates so much of this vicious cycle in terms of controlling how we metabolize so many of these neurotransmitters. And then in the health of the barrier of the gut, it's really quite dependent on the microbiome. And then, when we think about it, this bidirectional relationship happens. So when we have chronic pain, it also actually feeds back to the health of the gut and the gut microbiome. So again, it's very bidirectional in nature. And when we have chronic pain, we know that this has an impact on a number of different pathways in the gut. So, pain changes a number of neurotransmitters which regulate gut motility, for example. And so we start to get a lot of different symptoms related to pain that are in response to changes in neurotransmitters and gut motility. And that's not even taking into account things like the medications that we use to treat pain. So that's just the physiology, and not even, the impact of so many of our therapeutics on the motility and health of the gut. So they really do interact with each other on a number of different levels. So our current understanding of a lot of this really comes from a lot of animal models. And I have to emphasize that, because I think it's such a fascinating area and we're learning so much about it, but we really are in a stage of very early learning about the exact mechanisms for how all of this works. And we have so much work to do from a research standpoint, especially with humans and in real life, to really understand what some of the medical implications are going to be for all of this and what the therapeutic interventions are going to be. I've said a couple of times, I think one of the biggest levers in controlling the gut-brain axis and the health of your gut microbiome that we have under our control is really our lifestyle. Diet and exercise, arguably sleep, and stress management have a tremendous impact on the gut-brain axis, the health of the gut and the brain, and on the gut microbiome as well. So a lot of that is within our control, which is actually really cool. And I think that we're going to continue to see, a lot of evolving therapies around this, and we'll talk a little bit about that next week. For example, is there a role for antibiotics in modulating the gut-brain axis and then changing the trajectory of chronic pain? Is there a role for probiotics? Can you take probiotics and alter your chronic pain? What about fecal transplant? Like, that's really interesting. And I think that all of those are really in very early stages of our understanding. But they're really interesting questions, and we don't really have good answers to them at this time. And so in the absence of that, what we do have really is diet and lifestyle when it comes to levers that we can reliably and consistently control to alter the health of our gut microbiome and the gut-brain axis, and probably have an influence on a number of these disease processes as we go along. And so maybe with that, I'll leave it for some questions, and like the teaser to please come back over the next couple of weeks, so that we can really talk about, like, how do you keep a healthy gut microbiome, and what are the diet and lifestyle, like the specifics of how we can do that.
Great. Yeah, I'm really understanding that this is such a foundation for so many different lifestyle changes that we can make, that we'll get into in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, a few questions here. Peter asks, have bacterial strains been identified as having properties that would positively influence chronic pain?
Yeah, yes. And what's really interesting about them is that it depends on the bacteria, and it depends on the pain, and it depends on the study. So if you look at irritable bowel, for example, and the chronic pain associated with irritable bowel syndrome, certain strains of bacteria have been associated with the reduction in pain. But it's not consistent across studies. So bifidobacterium, for example, is felt to reduce pain. But other strains of bacteria seem to be more important in reducing global symptoms of irritable bowel, like gas and bloating, for example. And so, it's not just pain that we're looking at when we look at IBS management, but other things like gas and bloating and diarrhea and stuff. And different forms of probiotics influence pain differently than they influence diarrhea, for example. So we really need to think carefully about what we're asking for. When we look at migraine headaches, or that's one example of where there's research looking at the gut microbiome and its role on headache pain management. And the data are frankly quite inconsistent right now. So, I'd love to be able to give someone like a recipe that says, you could take probiotic X and this would help your headache, and you could take probiotic Y and this would help your IBS. But the data are actually not very consistent. And part of that probably relates to the fact that we're all starting out with our own little unique fingerprint and a different type of dysbiosis. And so for me, taking bifidobacterium may or may not be the right way of, like, shifting my gut microbiome towards less headaches, for example, because we start with such a different baseline. And so I think what'll get really interesting is when we can start to reliably measure your gut microbiome, and then give you a probiotic or give you a dietary shift that changes your gut microbiome, and then see what happens to your headache pain, for example, or see what happens to your IBS 6-12 months later. That, I think, is where we're going with a lot of this, but we're not there now.
Well, I sure appreciate the scientifically backed information, because I know, so many people might go into a health food store, nutrition store, and are told certain things. And so it's just good to know what, where things are at right now. There's a question on, is there a connection between your gut and Bose lines? I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is either.
No. Okay, Paul, we're not quite sure what
Sorry.
that is. If you want to explain that, we'll move on to the next one. Valerie says, I've listened to talks by some naturopaths who have developed microbiome supplements. Okay, I don't think this is a question, but some have identified bacteria with related benefits, impact on body.
You know, I guess my response to that is that this is just such an evolving field. And we're really very early on in our understanding of the gut microbiome. And again, you need to be very careful what you ask for, because there's some shifts in microbiome that might help you with your your chronic diarrhea, but they may actually make your headache pain worse. So, not all probiotics are created equal. And then, as I say, we all have this different kind of fingerprint that we're coming into. This is such an exploding field that and it's very unregulated, frankly. So there's a tremendous number of stool testing kits that are starting to become available internationally. There's some that are developed here in Canada, and there's some that are developed in the States, and they're widely available. You can send your stool in and get stool testing done, and you get this like fantastic, cool report about what your gut microbiome is. But here's the thing: different test kits are made differently. Some are based on DNA, some are based on RNA. We actually don't know how to compare apples to oranges. Like I said, we don't actually know what the gold standard healthy microbiome is. So when we get these test kits, they're telling you that your microbiome is good or bad compared to a reference standard or to the gold standard, but we don't actually know what the gold standard is.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't have data over the long term that tells us, even if you do change that microbiome, does that change your health outcome 6, 10, 50 years down the road? Does that make you less likely to get inflammatory bowel disease? Does it make you less likely to experience chronic pain? Are you, less likely to get cancer? They're really interesting questions, but we actually don't have that data right now.
Right.
I think we'll see a lot of it in the next 2 to 5 years, 5 years for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But today, there's still a lot of unanswered questions. And I would say the same for a lot of supplements that are available. There's just such an abundance out there, and it depends what purpose you're using them for, and they may be good or bad, but it's hard to make a really blanket statement around them other than be very thoughtful, be careful what you ask for.
Yeah. Well, that probably answers that. Sarah, I'm wondering if we want to stop the slide share, and then then we'll have our faces. There we go. Yeah, at least
I can see now I've got a rooster tail.
Gotta check your hair now. So it probably relates to the next question. How do we test to see the state of our gut microbiome? How do you assess if it's not in a good state?
Yeah, that's a good question, because, again, it relates to so many different chronic diseases. And from a gut standpoint, it probably relates a lot more to function, like to gut function, in terms of consistency of stools, frequency of stools, gas, bloating, those sorts of things. But, as much as that's dependent on your microbiome, it's also very much dependent on what you're eating, and your gut microbiome will shift and move with what you're eating, right? So those two things kind of really, they go together. They're hard to separate out. Fiber is a good example. I think I saw a question or a comment or something along there. Fiber is so hard. I mean, fiber is like one of the the most difficult things to digest and tolerate. It causes a lot of gas and bloating, and gas causes pain and it makes you miserable. But it's also one of the most important things that you can consume to maintain the health of your gut. And so the details are kind of always where things become important, is like, how do you scale back on fiber, for example, so that you can start to drive a healthier gut microbiome, and then bit by bit by bit, slowly and gradually start to increase the dietary fiber that you're getting. Recognizing that not all fiber is the same. The impact of soluble fiber and insoluble fiber is wildly different on digestive symptoms and gut health. So they kind of like, you just can't have one without the other. Like you can't really talk about microbiome and not talk about diet, and vice versa. They go together.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. A question about how would soap suds. Oh, sorry, my dog just ran by outside. What happened?
Outside.
How would soap? I might have to go. How would soap suds? No, my son will get her. How will soap suds and enemas affect the microbiome? I've been dependent on them for the last 10 years to even have a bowel movement, and worried about how this affects my overall health.
Yeah, so really any type of laxative is going to have some form of impact on the gut microbiome, whether we're ingesting it or regardless of which direction it comes in, I suppose. And so most enemas, frankly, affect like the rectum and the sigmoid colon. But when you think about your colon, like the cecum, the ascending colon, the transverse colon, those are not going to be affected by an enema. And so much of your microbiome really it's throughout the gut, right? It's or throughout the colon primarily. And so, enemas are going to really just affect a small portion of that. And really what they're doing is just kind of mechanically washing out stool that's very lower down in the gut. So probably not a massive impact, to be honest with you, especially when you've been doing it over a long period of time.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so many impacts from different forms of laxatives, really on gut motility. We're kind of talking about gut motility there, like how quickly things are moving along. And if things move slowly compared to quickly, those do have impacts on the gut microbiome, regardless of whether we do that through laxatives or through diet or things like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, there's a couple of questions about if our microbiome is not well formed or healthy due to childhood, state or trauma. Is there a way to reverse that? I guess they're just talking about the fingerprint.
Yeah, so I would think of it not so much like reversing things, because you don't want to kind of go backwards. Think of the best analogy I can think of for your gut microbiome is an old growth forest. Your gut microbiome is like this old forest, and you want to gradually and slowly nurture it down into the direction that you want it to be, which is abundant and diverse, even though we don't necessarily know the gold standard. So think of that as like this old growth forest, which is really this very dynamic ecosystem, and it's kind of constantly changing and moving. And you want to slowly and gradually shift that. And your most powerful lever for doing that is your diet. And that really comes down to like this, what your grandma would have told you: your fruits and your veggies and your fiber are your biggest ways of changing, manipulating, controlling that, in addition to a diet that's rich in fermented foods and probiotics through things like yogurt or kefir or kimchi, sauerkraut, all those kind of things will help to kind of steer that forest over time. I think that we always like to get a clean slate, right? We all love that idea. It's like New Year's and you get a clean slate. And we often want that for gut health and the gut microbiome, but it's kind of like clear cutting an old growth forest. You don't get rid of just bad bacteria, you get rid of all bacteria when you think about clear cutting. And then you're starting from scratch, and that's not actually what we want when you think about all of these complex interplays with like so many aspects of our health. So really think of it as kind of like gently steering this whole growth forest over the long term is probably going to get us a lot better results than clear cutting. Because when you clear cut and you do it for a short period of time, you get your fingerprint back. It comes back to you. And so like short-term probiotics, short-term dietary changes, it in some ways it's sort of like clear cutting, and then you drift back to your fingerprint of how you were. So we want to shift and kind of take this like really beautiful ecosystem and grow and manage it over time. And again, our diet and exercise is the best way to do that.
I love that
Mm.
that analogy of sort of growing and cleaning up what steering it in a certain direction, what we already have. We're almost at 7, but I did see one more question in here. Where was it now? Oh, yeah, let's just take one more last question, and then your voice is held out very well. I'm impressed. Is there some type of breath test? A gas or methane or some type of breath test?
There's so many.
Oh,
there's so many. And again, it really depends on be careful what you're looking for. Because in health we have a pattern of gases that we exhale, like we all do. It's normal physiology. We've been kind of led to believe that somehow it's really abnormal to exhale gas, but we all do. And so different patterns are linked to different microbial profiles. That's very true. Really what people are getting at when they're asking about that is the concept of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth for the most part, which frankly is extraordinarily controversial and much more controversial than we would believe based on what's kind of available to us through various media chains and outlets and different things. It's actually a very controversial area, and the reliability of a lot of that kind of testing is actually quite crummy. So yes, it exists, but it's not fantastic.
Wow. Well, I think you probably saved a lot of people a lot of time and money, and just because there is so much out there and so much information, and it just, yeah, you provide such a reliable source of information, and yeah, I just see a lot of people saying thank you, and yeah, so yeah, Sarah, I really want to just thank you for kind of again like setting the stage for us to move forward in the next couple of weeks. And for all of you that are here next week, I think we're diving into we're going to dive into more about the microbiome and chronic pain, I think, more specifically.
And really kind of more specifically about, I want to talk about like how can you change your microbiome? Like what do you, I keep talking about diet. So, okay, like what do you want the recipe, right? Everyone wants the recipe. So we can talk about that. And then I think we'll spend some time in one of our next sessions talking about like the impact of pain medications and how to mitigate some of that on your gut health as well. So
yeah, that will be really helpful as well. And again, if you had a burning question, we didn't get to it. I know there were some questions in the Q&A, but hopefully we covered some of those. And yes, the recordings will be made available, all 4 of them. So don't worry about taking down too much information. during the hour, because it's a lot. And yeah, thanks to everyone for coming, and to Sarah for being here this week. And Mark, do you want to
Yeah,
take-
no, I
take
just
goodbye and wrap it
Sarah,
up?
thank you. This is one of the best presentations we've had, and I really look forward to installments 2, 3, and 4. Like, it's really interesting, and I think you're right. Like how we've just started to scratch, under the surface of the link with so much of our immune system, central sensitization. I mean, just the points that you've highlighted are really interesting and fascinating. So no, I thank you very, very much. It's been great.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
And to so many participants, it's just so
Mhm.
cool. And really, I think I would welcome, if there's some questions, maybe we'll be able to like email them or write them down or something somewhere, and I can kind of filter through some of those over the next couple of weeks. And as I construct, our next few talks, and I can try and integrate some of
Okay.
that.
That's a great idea. I'll take the ones from the Q&A that if there are some that we didn't get to. And if you have questions that you would like Sarah to address over the next 3 weeks, you can just email them to me, and I'll forward them, and we can compile them. So yeah, thanks. This is always such a great Monday night group, the people that gather here, and and we will see you all next week.
See you next week.
thanks, Sarah.
All
Take care.
right.
Bye-bye. See you guys.
Okay. Good night,
Bye.
everyone.
Good night.